Hello everyone, thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to discuss what caused me to make the switch from Final Fantasy XIV to World of Warcraft. I noticed in the last couple years playing Final Fantasy XIV, a lot of players coming from World of Warcraft to Final Fantasy, especially during Shadowlands. It happened a lot during Shadowlands. They were leaving World of Warcraft, coming in to play either Shadowbringers, like the end of Shadowbringers, the beginning of Endwalker. I'm one of the few people who decided to jump the other direction. So in this video, I'd like to take a few minutes, and discuss what reasons caused me to make the switch. So here we go. Before we get into it though, I'm going to take a few minutes here just to discuss some similarities and differences between the games that affected my decision. And if you are thinking about making the switch one way or the other and you don't know much about one game or the other, maybe these differences will help you decide what you want to do.
Final Fantasy has always been known for the quality of its story. You are the warrior of light, or darkness, depending, and it's up to you and a small group of heroes to save existence from annihilation over and over again. It's a very common theme in Final Fantasy as a whole, and it's done brilliantly in Final Fantasy XIV. While the story started slowly in A Realm Reborn, it rose to near perfection by the end of Endwalker. However, for me, this was also one of the downsides of the game. Once the main story was completed, I just didn't get hooked by the beginning of the new story.
World of Warcraft, on the other hand, is not really known for the quality of its story, even though it can be as good, if not better, than Final Fantasy XIV's at times. Stormblood is a good example of times when I feel that Final Fantasy XIV really dropped the ball on its storytelling. World of Warcraft handles its narrative very differently than Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has an overarching story that takes in the entire world. The story sends you to the zones. The story is the reason you're in the zones. The story is the reason you're doing dungeons. World of Warcraft is very different. World of Warcraft has what I like to call zone storylines. Each zone has its own separate story where they're not really connected to the overall narrative that's going on in the current expansion. You can do quests in Here's Fallglades, for example, and these quests stay in that one zone. They don't go outside of the zone. Whereas Final Fantasy, if you're doing a quest, the story sends you to this zone or that zone. That's the reason you're there. The story is the reason you're doing everything you're doing in that game. Sometimes, however, the zone storylines in World of Warcraft feed into the main narrative,
As is the case with Northrend in Wrath of the Lich King. The only true story that remains throughout most of the expansions is Horde versus Alliance. Dragonflight sets that aside for the time being to focus on a new narrative featuring the dragon aspects.
Some people may think the two games are vastly different, but there's actually quite a few similar systems in place. You can really tell when you play World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy that the Final Fantasy developers are fans of MMOs in general, and World of Warcraft in particular. They actually base some of their systems on World of Warcraft systems. While these systems are similar, I've always felt that one game did a better job than the other handling them.
The way they handle classes or jobs is one of the biggest differences between the two games. In Final Fantasy, one character can choose to be anything. While in World of Warcraft, if your character is, for instance, a warlock, then a warlock is all they'll ever be. They give you options on World of Warcraft through different specs and multiple talent tree choices. Post-character creation customization is 100% won by World of Warcraft, in my opinion. As long as you remain the same race and class, you could change anything else about your character, even the gender. If it was an option available at character creation, when you first created the character, then it's an option in the barbershop. And even better, it's 100% free. It doesn't even cost you any in-game money. Final Fantasy allows you to change hairstyles, hair color, maybe some face paints and tattoos. Any changes you make to your character costs in-game currency, gil, but anything more than that, even something as simple as changing your eye color, it's going to cost you some real money. Transmog, or Glamour as it's called in Final Fantasy, is another system where I feel World of Warcraft comes out far on top. Final Fantasy system has improved greatly with the addition of the Glamour Dresser and Glamour Plates recently, but it's still a system with a limit in place on how many appearance items you can have. Transmog has no limit, and you don't have to keep the item once you have its appearance. In Final Fantasy, you have to keep the item and it uses one slot of inventory space from the Glamour Dresser, which is limited. The only upside to Final Fantasy system over World of Warcraft's is that it doesn't cost you anything to glamour items in Final Fantasy. There's always an in-game gold cost to change an item appearance in World of Warcraft, unless you're just making it invisible.
Well, if you've made it this far, how about clicking that like button for me and subscribing to the channel? You can also turn on the bell to be notified when I go live with new videos or new live streams. So we come at last to the subject that hopefully brought you to this video in the first place. What actually made me switch from Final Fantasy to World of Warcraft when so many other people were doing the opposite?
Several factors played into the decision to make the switch for me. I played Final Fantasy since 1.0, even though it was not a regular player during that period. I have been a full-time Final Fantasy player since A Realm Reborn's Alpha, which comes out to be probably about 10 years. I have 505 days of playtime in the game. The problem I was having with it was it has not really changed that much since its beginnings in 2013. The gearing treadmill is still the same as it was at the beginning. Run content, earn tombstones, buy gear with those tombstones, run the current 24-man raid, earn an upgrade token, upgrade to tombstone gear. If you weren't a Savage Raider, that was really the only path that was available to you for getting decent high-level gear. And the system is very, very stale. It needs an update really badly. I've recently been introduced to Mythics in World of Warcraft, and as a casual player, they are absolutely amazing. I love them. Unless you're pushing high keys, it's a very casual experience, and you can get good endgame gear that you can upgrade. Eventually, your Mythic gear can be on par with someone who raids. You can also get decent items just by completing world quests. World of Warcraft just has so many more options for gearing. It really makes Final Fantasy systems look antiquated and behind the current times. One of the main things that kept me from enjoying World of Warcraft was borrowed power systems. These systems were at their worst during Shadowlands, which is why Final Fantasy, I think, received such an influx of what we called WoW refugees. What enticed me to come back was the fact that all these borrowed power systems like Soulbinds, Legendaries, Covenant powers, they were all being removed. There was not going to be anything like that for Dragonflight. Your character power is determined by your gear, really, and nothing else, which makes playing alts much more enjoyable. Speaking of alts, I love alts. I always want to play alts, but in Final Fantasy, alts are very, very difficult to play. I mean, it's not hard to make them. Anyone can make an alt. But where it comes into play that they're difficult is there are so many game systems that are unlocked through the main scenario quest, or what Final Fantasy players call MSQ. It makes playing an alt a pretty big headache. Once you get all your jobs to level cap, there's really nothing else you can do to level, which is something I really enjoy doing. I love to level. It's one of my favorite activities to do. For me, it's really relaxing. I like that. Finally, the Pathfinder system. I could probably spend a whole video talking about how much I hated Pathfinder. I don't think I need to say much more about it if anyone's paid attention to my channel. It's a horrible system. It was horrible when they added it. It was still horrible when they had it in place in Shadowlands. It's one of the worst things Blizzard ever did to World of Warcraft as far as I'm concerned. The fact that the system was being removed for Dragonflight was like them sending me an email saying, hey, this thing is gone now, come try the game again. And I was at the point where I was ready for a change. Final Fantasy was stale, the game's systems were stale, the story that I cared about had ended with Endwalker, and the new one they were beginning just didn't hook me in. I wasn't interested in it. I found I just wasn't having fun anymore in Final Fantasy. And if they do nothing else, games should be fun. And I was finding World of Warcraft fun again.
So there you have it. That's how I came to be here today, having fun again in World of Warcraft. Hey, I even bought the 1-year subscription against my better judgment. If you're thinking of making the switch one way or the other, let me know why in the comments below. And I will catch you guys in the next video or live stream. Take care.